Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this, our 27th podcast episode. As always, I'm honored that you're taking the time to give a listen and to join us for our conversations. It really means a lot that you are listening, and I hope that you will continue to spread the word with your colleagues and friends about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. You know, the great thing about podcasts is that they are archived and you can go back and listen to previous episodes at your convenience. And we have some great conversations that we've shared since we started this project back in March of 2020. So I hope you'll check out some of them. You know, none of this would be possible without the support of sponsors, and I want to take a minute to thank them personally. First is our friends at Hal Leonard, publishers of the Essential Elements Band Method and the world's largest music publisher. I'm honored to be a part of the Hal Leonard family, and I'm so proud of the work that has been done with the Essential Elements interactive website. I know so many teachers who are teaching elementary and middle school students virtually, and they have found this to be a lifeline. And a couple of months ago, we launched an Essential Elements Band Talk podcast with Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser and Paul Lavender, both co-authors of the Essential Elements Band Method, and Steve Smith, who heads up the Essential Elements interactive website. You can find that podcast only on the EEI blog at eeiblog.com. There you can sign up and receive notices when new episodes are available. We've had some great conversations there as well. And if you're teaching beginners in any way, shape, or form, you will certainly want to check it out. Also, I want to thank our great friends at Vandercook College of Music. You know, I taught at Vandercook for 23 years, and it's a great college, and they do an incredible job of preparing music educators. And for all those teachers who went to Vandercook for their master's degree or took classes in the Mecca Continuing Education program, you know there is no better place for you to go and learn the rest of the story to being a music teacher. Nobody connects the dots quite like Vandercook. And I saw their fall lineup of online classes in the Mecca Continuing Education program, and it is a virtual who's who and the widest range of classes I've ever seen. So check them out at vandercook.edu. Recently, I added 2 new sponsors to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And one is my old friend Kevin Lepper and his Advantage Network Percussion Company. Kevin has so much to offer, and I can tell you the best thing about Advantage Network is that you get to work with Kevin Lepper. I've known Kevin for 47 years, and well, he's simply the best. You will find great products for your program, and Kevin will help you out with drum heads, sticks, mallets, concert attire, marching accessories, beginner stick bags, specially designed percussion trap instruments, and percussion ensembles. But again, like I said, you get to work with Kevin Lepper. He's an amazing guy. Visit Advantage Network at AdvantageNetworkInc.com. And finally, joining me recently has been my friends at thepodcastingstore.com. You know, podcasting has become a real hobby for many of you, and they have the great equipment that you need for your podcasting. But let me tell you, podcasting equipment isn't only for podcasting. If you're involved in virtual teaching, getting yourself equipped with a good microphone and accessories to turn your computer into a real teaching station, well, they have all the stuff you need at thepodcastingstore.com. They have all the top brands at great prices, so visit them today, too. Well, friends, Labor Day has come and gone. What started as an unwelcomed visitor earlier this year has turned into a dreaded house guest that just won't go away. I mean, this coronavirus was supposed to be gone by summer, when it got hotter, when kids were out of school. You name it, it was supposed to be gone. But it's a public health issue that has turned into a political football. In the words of Stephen Covey in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where you stand on this issue depends on where you sit. I've talked to teachers around the nation, and some are scared to death, and some aren't fazed in the least. I've heard folks advocating for face-to-face instruction, and others who do not want to go back to face-to-face learning until the virus is under control or there's a vaccine. And regardless of your position, one thing I think we can all agree on is that this darn pandemic has impacted our lives. It has impacted our personal lives, and it has impacted our professional lives. It did so in the beginning, and it is still doing so some 6 or 7 or 8 months later. And it is not only impacting our lives, it is having a great impact on the world. There are families of our students who are out of work, wondering how they will make it through the next few months. There are internationally known hotels that are shutting their doors. I just learned that the famed Palmer House Hotel in Chicago was closing because it owes more than $300 million. $300 million. Imagine how many band instruments that would buy. The impact is all around us. But for those of us who have jobs, who are teaching, we have to view this as nothing more than an inconvenience. Hopefully your security and the security of your family has not been threatened, and that you will continue to work with your students in some way, shape, or form. So as we do this, we have to remember our goal as music teachers. Our goal as music teachers is to teach music and to instill in our students a lifelong love of and appreciation for music. Now, the problem is the normal vehicles that we are used to have all changed with the virus. But the goal remains the same. And how we do this? Well, that's the challenge. But like anything else, we have to remember that we must keep it positive and we must keep it upbeat. During this time, we are going to need to celebrate the small victories. There will not be a one-size-fits-all solution, and there will be things that work for you and things that don't. But you can't get discouraged, and it's important that you keep on trying. The key to all of this is going to be your level of communication. Don't be afraid to ask questions of your colleagues, your music dealers, and your administration. Check in with parents to get their feedback on things their students would like to see or are having issues with. Communicate directly with your students and give them small, manageable assignments. Find some enrichment material for those talented ones who you feel may be getting bored. Solos, reading assignments, composition projects, theory classes. Something that will challenge their creativity and their initiative. Find some remedial material for those you know are struggling. Worksheets they can fill in and take a picture of and send to you. Send them videos or recordings of music and artists that might reignite their passion for playing their horn or beating their drum. And don't forget to celebrate the small victories. Give them those assignments you know they can easily master, and then make a big deal out of it. Then each time, make it just a very little bit more challenging. These are the students we need to foster. Remember, there are students who the band needs, and there are students who need band. Set up ways for students to communicate with each other and you. Zoom calls, chat rooms, anything to let them know they are not going through this alone. Again, the key is communication, and those who communicate the best and the most are probably the ones who will get through this in the best shape. I wish you well. On today's podcast, we have a great conversation with Paula Crider, an incredible band director who had a terrific high school band in Austin, Texas, and was on the band staff at the University of Texas, Austin, for many years. Dr. Crider is past president of both the National Band Association and the American Bandmasters Association. I know you are going to enjoy our conversation, and I'll be bringing that to you right after we check in with our friends at thepodcastingstore.com. We'll be right back.
Thepodcastingstore.com is your one-stop shop for the finest in podcasting, remote and virtual teaching, and amplification tools. Thepodcastingstore.com features leading brands like Audio-Technica, Heil microphones and headphones, Rolls Electronics, Rode microphones, PreSonus, Yamaha, Focusrite interfaces, Roland, and Blue Yeti. With a product mix compiled by experienced educators and podcasters, thepodcastingstore.com focuses on providing products that assist you in more clearly communicating your message to your audience, whether you're an educator, podcaster, or hobbyist. Thepodcastingstore.com. Visit them soon.
Well, it was in the late 1980s. I had been honored to have been asked to judge the Texas University Interscholastic League Marching Band competition in Austin. And, you know, there's a lot of great bands in Texas, and there's great band after great band. And then all of a sudden, mid-afternoon, this little band comes out. It's not a little band. It's a big band. They come out, and they absolutely kicked it to like 6 levels above anything I had watched and heard up to that time. And they had so much energy, and they were exciting, and they were so precise, and they played so beautifully. And it was the Crockett High School Band from Austin, Texas. And I was asking about it, and they said, "Oh, well, you got to meet her director." And I said, "Well, who's that?" And they said, "Paula Crider." I said, "I've never heard of Paula Crider." And they said, "Well, you're gonna." And the band was so awesome. And who'd have known years later, she's one of my dear friends in the profession. And it's just an honor to welcome Dr. Paula Crider to the podcast. Paula, thank you so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Charlie. Thank you.
Well, Paula, you're nationally known and respected as a band director and music educator. You've done so much. I mean, you served as the president of the National Band Association, president of the American Bandmasters Association. I mean, you've been just such a leader in the band world, and especially a leader for female band directors around the world, and probably everyone listening to this podcast has either worked with or heard one of your many terrific clinics. And if they haven't, well, it's certainly their loss. And I'm sure they will when this COVID thing ends and they have a chance to get out in public and go to professional activities. But, most of us don't know about the young Paula Crider. So why don't you tell us where you grew up and what your earliest recollections of music was and the role it played in your life?
Well, I grew up in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Actually, there's a town called Waveland that no one's ever heard of.
Waveland, Mississippi was decimated by the hurricane, right? Katrina.
Exactly. The eye of the storm passed right over it, and my sister lived there, or still lives there. But yeah, that was quite we're holding our breath because every August, September, they're running into that danger of that again. But anyway, I grew up in a small town in Mississippi and traveled quite a bit because my mom and dad were divorced. So I would go north in the summer to visit my dad. And, people made fun of my Mississippi accent. So I learned how not to say y'all all the time and, had a great childhood.
So when did music start in your life?
Well, this is kind of a crazy story, and this always surprises people. I didn't start playing in band until halfway through my junior year in high school. So I played basketball, I played tennis, I ran track. I love sports. And my sophomore year, we had a great basketball coach, but as many coaches do, he became a principal. And the new basketball coach, it was a small school, so the coach coached boys and girls, and the new basketball coach didn't want to coach the girls at all. And we'd done very well going to state the year before. And I got so disgusted, I went into his office and he was sitting there with his feet propped on the desk, smoking a cigarette, reading a newspaper. And I said, Coach, we really need you out here. And he said, well, why don't you coach him? And I said some things that I probably shouldn't, and stormed out, and in a fit of anger, just ran up the stairs at the top of the gym. And when I got to the top of the stairs, the door opened, and here's a guy standing with a trumpet in his hand. And he said, oh, I was expecting you. And he put the trumpet in my hand, and he said, blow in the small end. And I did, and produced one of the worst sounds ever made to the world of trumpet playing, I'm sure. But I'll never forget that feeling. I became alive with the potential of that sound. And of course, he wasn't expecting me. And we found out later whoever was supposed to come didn't show up. But the long and short of it was, I quit basketball, joined the band, and the the rest is history, as they say.
So how long was it before you really started to take onto the trumpet and get some good sounds and start playing? And
between my junior and senior year, as I mentioned, we go to visit my dad, and his my aunt lived right outside of Washington, D.C. My uncle was high up in the Treasury Department. And so I would sit on, this is embarrassing. I would sit on the back porch and play Herb Alpert tunes. Because, like Herb Alpert, The Lonely Bull, not many people have ever even heard of Herb Alpert, but, with my feet propped up on the railing. And after about 3 days, this little short, bald guy, he kind of looked like William Ravelli, came over, and he's gesturing with his hands, and he goes, basta, basta. And I thought he was insulting my dad's parentage, but what he was saying, of course, in Italian is enough, enough. And so he asked me for my horn, and I reluctantly handed it to him, and he reached in his pocket and pulled out a mouthpiece and proceeded to play the most magnificent trumpet I've ever heard in my life. And as it turned out, his son was with the Italian embassy, and he had played at La Scala. So, and he spoke no English, but his son came over that night and apologized and said, I'm sorry, my dad was probably pretty hard on you, and of course I didn't understand all the terrible things he was saying about my trumpet playing. But he said, my dad said, if you will practice every day and stop playing that tune, he will teach you. So
obviously he didn't like Herb Alpert, did he?
No more Lonely Bull. And just, I was introduced to the Auburn method. And I was on fire, because when you sit next to someone who plays so magnificently, just being able to strive to emulate that sound makes all the difference in the world. So I had quite an epiphany between my junior and senior year. That was a great thing to have happen.
That is such a great story. I just think that is awesome. So at what point then did you decide, well, maybe I want to be a band director?
Well, my dad and both granddads were engineers, so I got the math genes. And so, I always thought I would go into some, scientific endeavor. I really like physics. And Dad took me around he went to MIT. So he took me to MIT, and then we went out to Stanford, and then we went to Rice. And as you know, in those days, none of those schools had decent music programs. So, I said, Dad, I'm going to major in physics, but I will, I want to go where there's a good band. So he just kind of threw up his hands and said, well, if you're not going to go to any of these places, then, you're on your own. So I wound up going to the University of Southern Mississippi. Bill Moody was the band director there. And I had a double major in English and physics. And sophomore year, I was learning how to restring a French horn just for the heck of it. And Bill walked by and said, you're not going to be happy if you're not a band director. And I thought about it. And it was kind of one of those, do you really think I can do it? And so, after that, my parents didn't know I was majoring in music till I started student teaching, but I added that to my major. And, I owe him so much, because he saw something in me that I certainly didn't see in myself.
That's awesome. I mean, you're one of the few, I'm sure, ladies at the University of Southern Mississippi that was a music major, an instrumental music major, that was going to become a band director, weren't you?
Right. There were a few, but yeah, and many of them majored in music and they did not wind up being band directors because so many were relegated to, well, sweetie, you can go teach general music, and that's not what any of us wanted to do. Not that that's a bad thing to do.
Sure. So where was your first job?
I started student teaching in a little town outside of Hattiesburg called Purvis, Mississippi. And 7 days into my teaching, student teaching, the band director had a heart attack. And my friends wanted to know what I did to precipitate that. And of course, it was not my fault. And it wasn't, heart attacks are serious, but it wasn't that serious. But he decided he was going to retire. His exact words were, "I'm not going to die on this expletive-deleted marching field." So the principal called me in and said, Paula, if you will be a substitute teacher, we'll pay you till we can find somebody, and then you can start your student teaching again. Well, long and short of it was the band program was, to be kind, very weak. No one would take the job. So I wound up being an instant band director after 7 days of student teaching.
And how long did you teach there?
2 years.
And then from there, what happened?
I decided that I really needed to learn more. So I followed Bill Moody out to the University of Texas. He was the director of bands there. And I had a teaching assistantship, but the music supervisor in Austin was looking for a band director to teach at Allen Middle School, or Allen Junior High, which was a minority school. And he called me and he said, "Bring me a recording of your band." And, a lot of people don't do that anymore. So I brought him a recording on Mississippi High School Band. He said, "I want you to teach at Allen Middle School. I'll arrange your band classes around your graduate classes." And it was like, best of all possible worlds. I get insurance, I get paid, I can still get my degree. So I taught for 2 years at Allen, which was one of the most magnificent learning experiences for me. It was 50% African-American, 49% Hispanic, and one child in the band was Anglo, and his dad was the director of the Salvation Army Band. I learned that very quickly because I told the kids they sounded like a Salvation Army band on a cold winter's night and got a call from the dad that night. But, I didn't even know how to pronounce Hispanic names, and I knew nothing about the cultures. And, the kids taught me. And once they learned to trust me, that I couldn't run them out of the band hall. And it was a wonderful experience. They'd never made a first division in concert before. And that first year, you'd have thought, we won the lottery when they did that.
Where they work so hard. Once that you can gain their trust and their belief in you, those kids just give their life and heart and soul for you. They just work so hard. I mean, their work ethic is just phenomenal.
And there's no difference. They have 10 fingers and beautiful minds. And, I just don't understand why we still are not. We celebrate differences, but we don't need to be afraid of them.
Yeah. So you then went from the junior high to Crockett.
I did, because that very same music supervisor who heard my high school band and watched me teach at Allen, his wife was one of the best middle school teachers that I ever knew. Her name was Verna Covington. And she wanted to be a high school band director, but her generation, it was just not done. And Mr. Covington always wanted to give a female a chance to prove herself. And so he gave me that chance. And I was the first female, the largest bands in Texas then were 4A bands. And I was the first female 4A band director in the state of Texas. And I shall be forever grateful to him for giving me that opportunity because, again, that just wasn't happening back in the day.
Yeah. So how long were you at Crockett?
I was there for 12 years.
Wow. So let me ask you, did you wear cowboy boots when you kicked all those male band directors' butts and at festivals and contests?
I did not.
You developed an incredible program there. What's your fondest memory of your time at Crockett?
Oh gosh, there are so many, but my fondest memories are not, winning a state marching contest or being invited to play at an international festival, but just, you know, those aha moments when the kids finally got it. And I can remember one in particular. We were playing the second movement of the Doll Sinfonietta, and I'd been trying to get the kids to release a note and let it just go off into silence. And they finally did it, and I just stopped and I looked and I saw my last chair third clarinet player in my wind ensemble. Tears were just streaming down her face. And I looked at the band and I said, "Did you guys feel that?" And nobody said anything. And then it was, "Yeah, you want to do that again?" Yeah. And it was one of those moments where I had finally become a good enough teacher to teach them to reach that next level of artistry, if that makes sense. And I'll never forget that moment, because once we felt that, man, we never let it go again.
Well, the Doll Sinfonietta is like one of the most fantastic pieces in the repertoire and one of the hardest pieces in the repertoire. And, you know, obviously you brought tears to our eyes for the right reasons. And we've both heard that played when it brought tears to our eyes for the wrong reasons.
Indeed, some of those clarinet licks brought tears to my clarinet players' eyes.
So Paula, so what made you move from high school on to the University of Texas?
Well, you know, looking back at my life, it's kind of funny because it's rather serendipitous. I was asked to interview for the assistant director's position at the University of Texas. I was very happy at Crockett. I loved the kids. Everything was going well. But my principal said, "Well, you know, go ahead and interview. You know, show them that courtesy." So I did. And, you know, about a week later, the dean called me back and we sat down and he said, "Well, we want to offer you the job." And I thought, oh, heck. And, and so I really didn't want it. So I went back to my principal and I said, "What am I going to do?" And he said, "Just quote a salary figure that they can't pay you and everything will be okay." So I went back and asked for, like, I think it was $10,000 more than I was making as a high school band director. And when he said, okay, it was, you know, my career path was sealed. But it was a good thing, because it was a good time for me to reach another level. And there was a guy named Tom Lee there who was the director of bands at the time. And I learned a tremendous amount from Tom. He was a wonderful musician.
Yeah, Tom Lee's a great musician. And from there, of course, he obviously went on to UCLA. And,
correct.
Where he continues to live out in California. But, you know, I had mentioned when I introduced you that I first learned about you when I was judging the Texas UIL. And what I didn't say is that a few years later, I got invited back. So I obviously didn't screw it up totally. And the University of Texas marching band did basically a performance for the parents and the students and the people in the stands. And Paul, I have never heard a sound like that in my entire life. And if people have never heard the University of Texas marching band square off at them and just like blow in their face and just make this incredible sound, I mean, they have missed one of the great experiences in life. So what was that like to stand in front of those kids on a daily basis and to just be bathed in that kind of quality of sound?
Oh, man, it was the best thing in the world. I mean, those kids, too, as you know, a college marching band is not comprised of all music majors. And it was at one time when I was director, I found out that you could be a college All-American. You didn't have to be an athlete. As long as you were in an activity and you had an academic professor that would write, and you had on a 4-point average, you had a 3.5 or better GPA. So I told the band about it and said, "Guys, this will look great on your resume if any of you are interested." Well, 213 kids were academic All-Americans that year. So just the level and the desire and the dedication. I have to say that, you know, Vincent Ardenino, who is passed away several years ago, started the traditions at the University of Texas. And, you know, I was just fortunate to be able to stand in front of those kids and try to take it to an even greater level. But those were great years.
It was a great band. And how many students were in the band at that time? I mean, it was a huge band.
Yeah. We had, I think we marched 360.
Wow. I still hear that sound. So throughout all of your teaching at the public school university, is there one moment that maybe stands out more than others?
You know, not really, because there's so many. And I know that sounds like a cop out, but when I was looking at your questions and I started thinking about that, and all of these things popped into my head, going all the way back to that first year of teaching. And I can still name every child that was in my band program, grades 6 through 12 in that band. So, there's no one moment, but they sure are a lot of moments, and they all center around making music.
Yeah, we all talk about those great moments in our teaching career. Those are the things we stick with. But in the back of our head, there's also those moments they go like, God dang it, if I could just have one more chance to do it again. It's like when I played golf and I had a bad shot, and they're like, oh man, I'd like to have a mulligan on that one. Is there anything that didn't go as you had hoped in your teaching career, and you said, man, if I could do it one more time, I've done it differently?
Oh man, I mean, I could list in the thousands, probably, those moments that, I'll never do that again. But, that's how we learn. But there's one that really sticks out. And that was the first year I was back at Allen Junior High. And the kids, the first day I asked them to play a B-flat concert scale, and they didn't know what I was talking about. So that'll give you the idea of the level at which they were playing. So I decided I wanted to play something really slow and beautiful to work on tone. And we were going to play that at our UIL concert competition. So we played a piece called Panis Angelicus. I know you know that piece. It's beautiful. And it was the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life, because teaching the kids to play with great tones on a piece that had ranges that were not comfortable for the kids, I just didn't know enough not to do that. And we played and played and played. And that first year, they did manage to make a first division at concert, but at the expense of just beating that piece into the kids. And I did what I detest as a music educator. If they still weren't getting a good sound and a chord was out of tune, then I would cut those kids out. And that just meant I hadn't figured out how to teach them. So yeah, there are many moments, but boy, that sticks out. Every time I hear somebody play that, it's like, yep, bet you won't do that again with that kind of band.
Yeah. We all have those times. I'm going to tell one on myself here. I've never told anybody this. But it was my third year teaching, and we took our high school band to a national festival in Washington, D.C., and we did marching and parade and concert and jazz. And one of the judges for the concert festival was William D. Ravelli. Another one was Frederick Fennell, and the list went on. Bill Schaefer from USC and all these incredible people. And I, as a third-year teacher, was dumb enough to program Elsa's procession to the cathedral. And I don't think Elsa made it to the altar that day. And I have never listened to the recording that Dr. Ravelli made. And someday there's going to be a big enough bottle of whiskey that I can sit down with that bottle and listen to that. I've never listened. I still have it. I've never listened to it. So we all have those moments. And hopefully we can look back at them and kind of laugh and know that there wasn't the end of the world when something goes wrong, was it?
No, but that's sure. I mean, that's how we learn.
Yeah. Well, since you ended your teaching career at the university level, notice I didn't say retired, because I know you are not retired. And if COVID had not hit, you would be somewhere in the world other than at your home in Austin area. But you've been involved in writing a book that was adopted by the state of Texas. You and Jack Saunders wrote an incredible book on some masterworks for band that, man, I really encourage high school directors and college directors to look at this, especially during this COVID time, because you've taken these masterworks and just laid them out for a course of study. But you've done that, and you've served as guest conductor and clinician all over the country. So when Paula Crider goes out and does a session, what's the overriding message that Paula Crider brings with her everywhere she goes?
I think that what I want to communicate to the kids, because I see so many times when the students play technically magnificently, but really don't understand the music. And so the first thing I want to give to them is to understand that the more that they give to the music, both intellectually and emotionally, the more the music will give in return. Because I think that, the kids that I work with, and especially with all the all-state bands now, they're beautiful young ladies and gentlemen. They're kind, they're considerate, and I think that getting to a level where we can really honestly feel the music, not just play it well, is my mission in life.
So, just a side question here. I know that you're scheduled to do the Kansas All-State Band in 2021 because Bob Davis, who had invited me to do it last year, and it's a great group, by the way, those kids, and Bob Davis organizes that thing better than anybody's organized anything ever. But is that still on?
It's up in the air, and I've done Kansas before too. I love those kids, and right now, most of the all states that I was scheduled for, of course, coming up like for Nebraska, decided to go virtual, and they're going to do a virtual performance of a piece, just so the kids, and in the states where they audition by tape, they can do that, and the kids at least have the honor of being in the all-state band. In places like Texas that are so large and they're live auditions, that's going to be a real challenge. But it just breaks my heart that great kids are kids are missing out on an awful lot right now.
Well, you got to understand you have such a powerful influence when you work with those kids, because Bob Davis was in one of the Kansas All-State bands when you guest conducted. And he still recalls that experience, and that's why he invited you. He said because you meant so much to him then, and now that he's an incredibly successful director in Kansas, you still mean that much to him. So I sure hope that goes. I hope that goes for you, and I hope it goes for the kids, but I really hope it goes for Bob, because he's just a great young man.
Well, he wrote me one of those beautiful, I'm going to keep this emails telling me that very thing. And, nothing makes a music educator feel better than to know they made a difference.
Well, you work with hundreds, probably thousands of teachers over the past years. And when you work with these teachers, you have time to interact with them. So what are the characteristics that impress you the most?
Oh, man, and I could go on and on and on, but probably the thread of commonality through all of that is that determination to always be better. I think that anyone who is a good musician, we learned that way back when we started practicing our horns. But, the dedication of these teachers, they have an idea, it's kind of that whatever it takes, and especially in the days of COVID. But all of the teachers with whom I've been fortunate to work they're curious. They want to know how to be better. They want to raise the bar. And, there's just that determination to be better. The people with whom I work all have that characteristic. I always am quick to say sometimes when I'm working with the conselmer or something, guys, I'm really talking to the wrong people. The people that really need to be here the most are the ones that never come.
Oh,
but these guys,
yeah, you're exactly right. You're always preaching to the choir when you're talking to those teachers, right? They're hungry to learn, and they have questions, and yep. So what's the biggest mistake that teachers make?
Oh, and guilty as charged. I think we all go through this, and it's to get so hung up on the notes and the technique that we forget about the music. And it took me a while to get past that. Of course, when you're a beginning teacher, you're figuring out, how to stand on the podium without falling flat on your face. But I think sometimes that we get so tied up in making sure that there's nothing wrong with the music, that it's in tune and in tone and in time, that we don't make sure that we go to that next level and we understand the whys of the music and express it that way. If that makes sense.
Oh, it makes all the sense in the world. Well, you've already mentioned Bill Moody and Tom Lee as being really big influences in your life. Are there anybody else that have served as really great influences for you?
Oh, man. Yes. Probably the first female role model with whom I ever worked was Elizabeth Green. And she had just retired, and I had gone up for a conference, and I'd been lucky enough to be her, take her around when she came down and gave a clinic at TMEA. And I called her and I said, Ma Green, is there any way that I could study with you and take a lesson? And oh yes, come up. We'll spend a week and I did that for 2 summers, and that it was just a total epiphany for me because obviously we just work with the orchestral literature, but just seeing the music through her eyes and learning better how to express myself bimanually was amazing. And then, a lot of people from whom I learned never knew that I was learning from them. But I was at every All-State and every Midwest, and the names like Ravelli and Fennell and Bijan and Battisti and Gabriel and Croft and Bourgeois and Whitwell and Hunsberger and Kramer and Keene. Bob Reynolds changed my life when I saw him conduct the All-State once upon a time. And my good friend Jerry Junkin. I mean, anyone who does well at what they do are people that have taught me.
So if you could write those people, if you wrote the profession of all those people that influenced you a little thank you letter, what would it include?
It would include a big thank you for showing me, well, how can I say this? For allowing me to see the art of teaching and the art of making music through your eyes.
Oh, wow. That is so succinct and so profound, because that's that really is. That's like amazing. That is exactly what they do, don't they? They let you kind of like see what's going on through their eyes. That's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, Paula, we haven't talked about COVID. This is probably the only podcast that's gone almost 35 minutes here and not mentioned COVID, but we got to bring it up. So think about back now, you're teaching, you got a pandemic, you're going to teach virtually. Any thoughts on how you'd approach it?
Whoa, yeah, I've been giving that a lot of thought actually, because I'm talking lots of directors off the cliff right now. And of course, going to different, like Florida Bandmasters, my first question was, what do you guys need? And it was like, we need to know what to do. So I think the first and foremost is just to keep the kids playing. I think that a lot of directors want to make sure that they're doing the same things that they did in their ensembles, and that's not always possible. So to keep the kids playing and then to be there for them, not just to keep that fire, that flame going for loving music, but also knowing that these kids are scared and things are uncertain, and having that rock of a caring teacher makes all the difference in the world. And then the last part of it is just to be as creative as you possibly can. I think that, and if I'm a student of history, and out of every disaster, good things have come. When you see what happened way back in the 16th century in the plague, how they finally figured out that they needed to make the sanitary conditions better. I think music will come out in another place for many people, because they've realized that in this situation, contests and competitions are not the be all end all. We've had to reevaluate how we teach, what we teach, and how we feel about it. So, I think that in COVID world, and, dear God, we need to get on the other side of that. But I see teachers struggling. I'm working on something right now. It's just a wellness. And in doing it and thinking about what I was going to say, it's the first time I admitted to myself that I'm really scared. And that was a real eye-opener for me. And then realizing that everybody is under stress and everybody feels that way. But the next step is we have one of the most glorious vehicles with which to get past this. And that's, making music, whether it's just listening to it or playing alone or playing a duet. When we do that, it takes us to another world. It creates the world as it ought to be. So, COVID is a scary thing. But the band director, I did a clinic for Florida Bandmasters called If Band Directors Were in Charge. Charlie, if you think about that, back in January, man, we would have been all over this. Because we're organized. We would have gotten the testing, we would have gotten the PPE, we would have gotten all the information we needed, and we've gotten band parents all over the country organized, and and life would have been much better than it is right now.
And they'd have probably raised more money than we have raised so far, knowing band parents, right? They can raise money and they can get everything done. Yep, you're exactly right.
Heck, they're all making masks and school colors as we speak.
Okay, Paula, last couple of questions. So what advice would you give to a 21-year-old Paula Crider?
To get over myself.
Yeah, you're in deep poo-poo when you believe your own press, right?
That's right. I mean, I think I felt like the history of Western civilization depended on my making, straight superiors with the Purvis High School band. And, and they did, but that wasn't the be all end all of where I want to be. So yeah, I want to take my job seriously, but I don't want to take myself as seriously as I did when I first started teaching.
So you got a favorite composer?
Oh, well, if the old who could you take to an island, it would be Beethoven, I think, because every time I listen to a Beethoven symphony, I hear another, stroke of genius. As far as the band composers, I don't think I could choose one because the answer I usually give is whatever I'm conducting. So and I really mean that, because if I don't believe in that composer and that piece, then, I shouldn't be doing it. But one of my all-time favorites is Ingolf Dahl. I think that is one of the most glorious and artistic expressions, and it's just there's perfection there.
Your answer, Beethoven, yeah, you're right. Ingolf Dahl is unbelievable. But your answer, Beethoven, is a great segue to a question that you didn't know was coming at you. I learned from a local doctor who we play golf with all the time that there is a theory that Beethoven developed his deafness from drinking wine that was tainted with lead. And that's why he went deaf. And I know you love a good glass of wine. I mean, you're not a wino by any stretch of the imagination. You don't run around with a paper bag and a bottle in it, but you do enjoy a wonderful glass of wine. So if I'm a wine novice and I said, man, I'm looking for just a nice wine to kind of sample, what would you recommend?
Ooh, I think that there's great metaphor in wine for musicians, because you think back, I think back about some of the first pieces I ever chose, and they were good pieces, but not the greatest pieces in the world. And then one day I'm conducting the Hindemith Symphony, and it's the same thing with wine. I would say decide whether most non-aficionados start out with a nice crisp white wine, and in the summertime a good New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. You can go to a Costco or something and get a bottle for $11 or $12, and just find what you like. I think that many of the California wines now are just incredible. They have some reds that are to die for. They're also fairly expensive, but again, it's once you start tasting wine, then you want something a little more. Just like once you get into music, you always want that next level of profound music. So, the bottom line is find what you like and enjoy it. I have probably 500 or 600 bottles here at the Black Dog Ranch. And it's occurred to me that I'll probably die before I finish them. So when, before COVID, I would always invite friends out to help me put a dent in that. And unfortunately, fortunately, it's growing a lot now because, we're pretty secluded out here.
Yeah, well, you're right. You got to just sample wine and find one you like. And there's some great wines, and they're not all that expensive. You get a great bottle of wine for under $20. It's great. So
absolutely.
I also know you're an avid reader. So you got any good book suggestions?
Oh yeah, the one that I'm recommending to everyone is called Dancing with the Gods. It's by Kent Nearburn, Nerburn.
Yeah, I was the one that stumbled across that book. In fact, I sent this was about 2 years ago. Is that a phenomenal book?
It is, and it just you come alive with the possibility and excitement about art when you read that. For fiction, probably the best written book I've read in the last 5 years is a book called A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. It's just one of those books where you read a paragraph and it's so eloquently, the prose is so eloquent that you'll go back and read it again just because it's great. And then if you want to laugh, have you read the series, the Richard Benson series, F and Exams?
I have not.
Oh, it's collections from teachers of answers that kids give on exams. For example, Joan of Arc was burned as a steak. Or my favorite was Sir Walter Raleigh circumcised the globe with a big clipper. So, and I mean, these are, and some of them, when it gets to the high school level, they're very inventive. And, I'm thinking if I were grading that, I'd at least give them a C for effort. But if, we need some chuckles in these days, and it's something I think everybody would enjoy. It's a whole series.
Is that Richard Benson?
Yes.
Okay, I gotta check that out. That sounds like fun. And Kent Nerburn is an incredible writer. He's a great spiritual writer, and he's written a whole series of books about the Native American Indian up in Minnesota and the Dakotas that I really encourage people to read, because he's one of those guys that you can't put down. And he's got a whole book on letters that he wrote to his son. And I mean, Kent Nerburn, Nerburn, folks, and this Dancing with the Gods, it will affirm everything you believe in about music and about teaching music and about art, and especially about the importance of art during this time. Don't you agree, Paula?
Oh, absolutely. You couldn't have said it better.
Paula Crider, you are a dear friend and you are a champion, and we love you, and I can't wait to see you again. And thanks so much for being on the podcast. This is such a special moment for me, and I look forward to giving you a big hug when I see you.
Oh, I'll look forward to it. Thanks so much, Charlie. Stay well.
Paula Crider is an incredible role model for all band directors, not just female band directors, but all band directors. And if you've never had the chance to attend one of Paula Crider's clinic sessions, well, you simply don't know what you're missing. As you can tell from our interview, Paula hits things head on, and she doesn't beat around the bush. She'll tell you what she feels works and what doesn't. She is a grand lady and a great band director. And like so many others in our profession, I am honored to call her my friend. Well, that's it for this episode of Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. I really appreciate you listening. And again, I ask you to tell your friends and colleagues about this podcast. And as always, this is Charlie Mangini saying, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.